Caleb Brooks stood in the rain outside the house he owned, next to the oak tree he had planted with his own hands, holding nothing but the quiet certainty that everything was about to change. His wife believed she knew exactly what he was worth. He was a project manager with a modest salary, a work truck, and a joint checking account with $340 in it. Elena had done the math. She had already spoken to a lawyer, already changed the locks, already planned where Caleb's belongings would sit in the garage he could no longer access. She had spent some time building her exit while sleeping in the same bed as the man she was robbing. So when Caleb pulled into his own driveway that night and she opened the door on a chain, fully dressed and completely composed, she felt certain she had already won. She told him to leave. She closed the door, and Caleb stood in the rain as though this moment had always been part of a larger blueprint he had drawn long ago. What Elena never thought to ask, not once in their years together, was where that second phone came from or whose name was on the black car that pulled up sometime later. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe because the next story is one you need to hear. Caleb's windshield wipers swept back and forth in a steady rhythm as he navigated the dark Cincinnati streets. The rain created a soft drumming on the truck's roof, a familiar sound that usually brought comfort after long days on job sites. Some time away had been productive, the kind of work that left a man tired in the right ways, knowing problems had been solved and things had been built properly. His work truck, a deliberately ordinary Ford F-150, handled the wet roads with familiar reliability. Like everything else in his visible life, the truck served its purpose without drawing attention. It was the vehicle of a working project manager, nothing more and nothing less, just as his father had taught him. Tools were meant to work, not shine. The neighborhood streets became more familiar as he turned onto his own block. The houses here were solid middle-class homes, well-maintained but modest. His house sat halfway down the street, a two-story colonial that normally welcomed him with warm exterior lights. Tonight, though, the house was dark. The timer-controlled lights that had functioned perfectly for years were off. He pulled into the driveway, the truck's headlights sweeping across the garage door. Reaching for his key fob, Caleb pressed the button for the garage door opener. The small LED flashed red. Code not recognized. He tried again, same response. Moving with the same deliberate calm that defined all his actions, Caleb stepped out into the rain. He walked to the side door, key in hand. The deadbolt had been thrown from inside. The front door yielded the same result. Caleb knocked, his knuckles making a solid sound against the wood. He waited, rain soaking into his jacket. When no response came, he knocked again, harder this time. The porch light snapped on, sudden and harsh. He heard footsteps inside, then the sound of the chain being drawn across its track. The door opened 4 inches, revealing Elena's face. She was fully dressed, her makeup perfect, her expression composed in a way that spoke of rehearsal rather than surprise. She had been waiting. "I changed the locks this afternoon," she said, her voice steady and practiced. "Your things are in the garage. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I need you to leave." "What is happening?" Caleb asked, his voice level despite the rain running down his face. Elena's response was simple, final. "I need you to go, Caleb." The door closed with a soft click. Caleb stood motionless, rain falling steadily around him. His work truck sat in the driveway. His bag held his laptop and work documents. The joint account Elena knew about contained $340. These were the visible pieces of his life, the ones she had calculated into her plans. Caleb turned slightly, looking at the oak tree he had planted. Its branches moved gently in the rain, strong and rooted. Then, with the same quiet precision that marked everything he did, he reached into his jacket and removed his second phone. He made a single call. "Go ahead and bring it around," he said softly. He ended the call and stood at the end of his driveway, hands loose at his sides, waiting in the rain as though this moment had always been part of a larger blueprint. Some time passed like water flowing over stone, steady, measureless, inevitable. Caleb stood motionless at the end of his driveway, the rain settling into his clothes with the same patience he had inherited from his father. Each drop was a timer counting down to something Elena had not calculated. Headlights appeared at the top of the street, their beams cutting through the rain with deliberate grace. The vehicle moved unhurried, like something that had never needed to prove its worth. As it drew closer, its form became clear. A Rolls-Royce Cullinan, completely blacked out from its massive grille to its tinted windows. The vehicle was a statement written in shadows and chrome, every line engineered to command respect without demanding it. The Cullinan pulled smoothly to the curb in front of Caleb's house. Even at rest, it seemed to hover above the wet pavement. Its presence transformed the modest suburban street into something else entirely. The young driver, Marcus, whom Caleb had hired some time ago through a separate LLC, stepped out with practiced efficiency. He moved to the rear door and opened it without a word, holding it with the precise angle and posture that spoke of professional training. Caleb walked to the car with the same measured steps he used on construction sites, each movement deliberate and grounded. He settled into the rear seat, and Marcus closed the door with a sound that was not so much a click as a whisper of precision engineering. The interior embraced Caleb like a familiar room. Dark, honey-colored leather wrapped every surface, hand-stitched and perfect. The cabin was completely silent, sealed against the rain and the world outside. Climate control had already created the exact temperature Caleb preferred. This was his space, ordered to his specifications some time ago, registered to an LLC Elena had never heard of, maintained with the same quiet attention he gave to everything that mattered. Caleb's personal phone buzzed in his pocket. The screen showed a message from Uncle Marcus, his father's younger brother, who had spent decades as a financial advisor before retiring. The man who had taught Caleb that money, like anything else worth building, required both patience and precision. "She did it tonight?" Uncle Marcus's text was direct, concerned. Caleb typed back, "Tonight." The response came immediately. "You all right?" Through the Cullinan's tinted windows, Caleb watched his house, the lights moving from room to room as Elena walked through spaces she thought she now controlled alone. He thought about the documents waiting on his laptop, the careful legal architecture he and Victoria had been constructing since Uncle Marcus's warning call some time ago. "Better than she thinks," he replied. Marcus navigated downtown Cincinnati's rain-slicked streets with smooth competence. The Cullinan moved like a shadow through traffic, drawing the kind of attention that came with darkness rather than flash. They pulled into the private garage entrance of one of the city's most discreet luxury hotels, the kind of place that understood the value of privacy and charged accordingly. The suite occupied the entire top floor, accessed by a dedicated elevator that required both a key card and a code. Caleb had maintained the space through another LLC for some time. One more piece of preparation Elena had never suspected. The monthly cost exceeded what she believed he made in a week. Inside, Caleb moved through familiar motions. The shower's pressure was perfect, the water temperature exactly right. In the suite's walk-in closet, a full wardrobe waited. Suits, casual wear, everything selected and maintained with the same attention to detail that marked every aspect of his hidden life. He sat at the desk and opened his laptop, the screen illuminated with documents that represented some time of careful legal preparation. Victoria's work was, as always, meticulous. Each file represented a different aspect of Caleb's actual financial life. The 11 properties spread across Cincinnati, Columbus, and Dayton. The silent partnership in the commercial development firm. The trust his father had left him, $1.4 million that had grown to $4.2 million through patient, precise investment. Caleb reviewed each document with the same focus he gave to structural engineering reports. Nothing rushed, nothing missed, nothing left to chance. The complete picture was clear and clean, every asset protected, every legal foundation solid, every detail accounted for. Standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, Caleb looked out over the nighttime city. Lights sparkled through the rain like stars brought down to earth. Somewhere out there, his properties stood quiet and profitable. His investments moved with the same patient certainty that had guided every decision since his father's passing. He thought about the oak tree standing strong in the rain. Then Caleb went to bed, lying down with the same deliberate calm that had carried him through the evening. There was no restlessness in his movements, no anger in his breathing. Only the quiet certainty of a man who had seen the structural weakness long ago and had built accordingly. Caleb woke at his usual time, his body operating on the same internal clock that had governed his life for decades. The suite's blackout curtains held back the dawn, but he opened them immediately, letting Cincinnati's morning light fill the space. The city below was already stirring, moving with the steady rhythm he had always appreciated. He ordered breakfast through the hotel's private service. Steel-cut oats, fresh fruit, black coffee. While waiting, he dressed in a charcoal Tom Ford suit that had hung unworn in the suite's closet for some time. The suit, like everything else in this space, belonged to a version of Caleb Brooks that Elena had never bothered to look for. At his laptop, Caleb reviewed the complete financial picture one final time. The numbers were exactly as they had been for some time. Each asset carefully documented and legally protected. 11 properties across 3 cities held in separate LLCs. The silent partnership in the commercial development firm that had completed 4 successful projects in the past period. The trust his father had left him, $1.4 million that Caleb had grown to $4.2 million through patient, precise investment. Victoria arrived exactly at the appointed time, carrying a leather briefcase that contained some time of careful legal preparation. She moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who had spent decades in rooms where precision determined outcomes. Her handshake was firm, her expression focused. "Everything is in position," she said, setting her files on the table. "The response is prepared, the financial disclosure is complete, and the forgery documentation is ready for the prosecutor's office." Caleb nodded, pouring coffee for both of them. "Walk me through the sequence one more time." Victoria opened her primary file. "When you give the word, we file the divorce response with the complete financial disclosure. Your wife's attorney filed this divorce expecting a marital estate under $700,000. The house, the joint account, your apparent salary. The disclosure will reveal $4.2 million in separate property that was correctly structured and maintained throughout the marriage. They have no claim on any of it. And the Avondale property? That's where it gets interesting." Victoria pulled out a separate document. "The forged transfer paperwork they filed, suggesting you'd signed over the 6-unit property to her LLC, is clear fraud. The forensic comparison with your legitimate signatures is definitive. When this goes to the prosecutor's office, it creates serious criminal exposure." Caleb sipped his coffee, thinking about the Avondale property, one of the first his father had bought. Maintained meticulously for some time, passed down with the same care that had marked everything in his father's life. The fact that Elena had tried to take it through forgery was a particular kind of betrayal. "Some time," Caleb said quietly, "since Uncle Marcus called about seeing them in Louisville." "Your uncle did you a service," Victoria noted. "That warning gave us time to build this properly. Every asset is protected, every document is in order, and every legal foundation is solid. When this hits, it hits all at once." Caleb stood, walking to the window. "Hold the filing for a few more days. I need to complete the investigation into Derek's professional conduct before we trigger everything simultaneously." "Understood." Victoria began gathering her files. "The documents are ready. When you give the word, everything moves within the hour." Caleb walked her to the door, thanking her with the same quiet courtesy he had shown since their first meeting some time ago. Once she was gone, he returned to the window, looking out over the city he had quietly built a significant stake in while maintaining the appearance of a simple project manager. He pulled out his phone and called Uncle Marcus. His uncle answered on the first ring. "Almost time," Caleb said. "Do it right, not just fast," Uncle Marcus replied, his voice carrying the weight of decades of financial wisdom. "That's the only way I know." After ending the call, Caleb began organizing his materials for his return to work. His desk at the construction firm would look exactly as it always had. His manner would be unchanged. His interactions would remain professional and measured. The surface would show nothing different while everything underneath was already decided. Like his father before him, Caleb understood that the most important work happened in the quiet spaces between what people thought they saw and what actually existed. Caleb pulled into the company parking lot at his usual time that Monday morning, the same time he had arrived for some time. His work truck, a practical Ford F-150 with the company logo, fit perfectly into his usual spot. Nothing about his appearance or manner suggested anything had changed. Inside, he nodded to the security guard, picked up his messages from the front desk, and walked to his office with the same measured pace he always used. The morning light filtered through the blinds as he settled into his routine, reviewing project timelines and contractor schedules with practiced efficiency. His team filtered in for their regular meeting. Caleb led the discussion as he always did, working through each item on the agenda with clear direction and calm authority. Only at the end did he address what everyone had likely heard through the office grapevine. "I should mention," he said, his voice steady, "that Elena and I are separating. I'm handling it, and it won't affect our work here. If anyone needs me, my cell phone remains the same." He moved directly to the next topic without pause. His team exchanged quick glances but followed his lead. There were no awkward questions, no offers of sympathy. Caleb had given them their cue. This was not something that required discussion, and they respected it. Throughout the morning, Caleb maintained his usual rhythm. He reviewed bid proposals, returned calls, and solved the dozen small problems that typically crossed his desk. If anyone noticed that he seemed particularly focused, they likely attributed it to work being his refuge from personal matters. Around mid-afternoon, a soft knock came at his door. Rachel Cross, one of the senior project coordinators, stood in the doorway. Her expression carried the weight of something that needed saying. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. Caleb gestured to the chair across from his desk. Rachel closed the door behind her and sat down, her hands folded carefully in her lap. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice low and controlled. "About a period ago, I was having dinner downtown at Martino's. I saw Elena there. She was with someone, a man. They weren't just having a business dinner." Caleb watched her steadily, letting her speak. "I've carried this for some time," Rachel continued. "I didn't know if I should say anything. I told myself maybe I was reading too much into it, that it wasn't my place." She met his eyes directly. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." "You're telling me now," Caleb said quietly. "That matters." Rachel nodded, relief visible in her shoulders. "I just wanted you to know." "I appreciate that," Caleb said. Then he added carefully, "I need to ask you for one favor. If anyone from Elena's legal team or anyone connected to Derek Lang reaches out about my work here, my projects, my client relationships, anything, I'd like you to document it and let me know directly." "Of course," Rachel said without hesitation. She stood to leave, then paused. "Caleb, you're one of the good ones. I hope you know that." Across town that evening, Elena and Derek sat at a corner table in an upscale restaurant sharing a bottle of expensive Cabernet. The lighting was soft, the tablecloth pristinely white, the atmosphere precisely what Derek preferred for celebration. "It went exactly according to plan," Elena said, swirling her wine. "You should have seen his face when he realized the locks were changed. Standing there in the rain like he couldn't quite process what was happening." Derek smiled, reaching across to touch her hand. "And the attorney?" "Completely confident," Elena replied. "She says the settlement should come through in some time. Clean split, straightforward division of assets." She laughed softly. "Poor Caleb probably thinks he can contest it somehow." Derek raised his glass, the crystal catching the light. In his mind, he was already allocating the expected settlement funds, expansion of the design firm, new office space, perhaps that showroom they had discussed. "To the next chapter," he said smoothly, every word carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Elena clinked her glass against his. Derek took a long drink, his expression confident and satisfied. The wine was perfect. The evening was perfect. And the future seemed perfectly arranged before them. He had no idea that the foundation he was building on didn't exist. Caleb sat in his office late that Wednesday evening. The building quiet except for the soft hum of the HVAC system. On his desk, 3 folders lay open, each containing documentation from different sources, each telling part of a story Derek Lang never expected anyone to piece together. His industry contact, Marcus Chen, had delivered the first batch of evidence that morning. Marcus ran business development for one of Cincinnati's largest commercial architecture firms and had crossed paths with Derek Lang numerous times over the past period. "I thought it was strange," Marcus had said, sliding the documents across the conference room table at their breakfast meeting. Derek's firm kept landing these contracts that seemed just outside their usual scope. Then I started hearing your name come up in conversations with clients. Caleb spread out the proposal documents Marcus had gathered. 3 major commercial design contracts awarded to Derek's firm between some time ago. The Hamilton Tower renovation, the River Point retail complex, the new University Medical Center wing. Combined value just over $4 million in design fees. In each case, Derek had positioned his firm as having a special relationship with Hayes Construction Management, Caleb's employer. He had referenced Caleb specifically in client meetings, suggesting an established partnership that would ensure smooth coordination between design and construction phases. He told the Hamilton Tower people you'd personally overseen 3 of his previous projects, Marcus explained, said you'd vouch for his firm's capabilities. Caleb made notes in his precise handwriting. 2 of the clients who had awarded those contracts, Robert McNally at Hamilton Tower and James Chen at River Point, had known Caleb professionally for over a decade. They had trusted Derek's firm partly because they trusted Caleb's implied endorsement. At mid-afternoon, Victoria arrived with the financial documentation. They spread the LLC filings across Caleb's conference table, creating a timeline of transactions that told its own damning story. "Look at the vendor invoices," Victoria said, pointing to a series of highlighted entries. "Everything's inflated by 15 to 20%. The excess gets moved to this holding account, then transferred in smaller amounts to a joint personal account opened by Derek and Elena some time ago." Caleb studied the account opening documentation. The timing was precise, exactly sometime before Uncle Marcus had spotted them together in Louisville, sometime before the first forged transfer attempt on the Avondale property. "They've been financially entangled longer than either of them has admitted," Caleb observed quietly. "And they've been sloppy about it," Victoria added. "The pattern is clear enough that a basic audit would catch it. They clearly weren't expecting anyone to look closely." Caleb moved methodically through each piece of evidence, organizing everything into a comprehensive timeline. Derek had used Caleb's professional reputation to secure contracts worth millions. He had extracted funds through inflated invoices. He had opened joint accounts with Elena while she was still presenting herself as fully committed to her marriage. "The professional fraud is actually worse than the financial irregularities," Victoria noted. "Those contracts were awarded partly based on your implied endorsement. McNally and Chen need to know they were misled." Caleb nodded, thinking of Robert McNally, a man he had worked with since his early days in construction management. McNally had always operated on the principle that a person's word was their bond. "Have you prepared the notification packages for the clients?" Caleb asked. "Complete and ready to go," Victoria confirmed. "Full documentation of Derek's misrepresentation, copies of the relevant proposal meetings where he invoked your name, timeline of the actual relationship or lack thereof between your companies." Caleb closed the last folder and looked at the neat stack of evidence they had assembled. "We have everything we need on him?" "More than enough," Victoria said. "The professional fraud alone would severely damage his standing in the industry. The financial irregularities in the LLC might constitute actual criminal fraud depending on how the prosecutor's office views it. At minimum, it opens him to significant civil liability." Caleb was quiet for a moment, considering the full weight of what they had uncovered. Then he said simply, "Prepare it all. When we file the divorce response, this goes to McNally and Chen simultaneously. Everything drops at once. It will be comprehensive," Victoria assured him. "Derek won't see it coming until it's already done." The diner sat on the corner of Madison and Edwards, a plain brick building that had been serving breakfast to early risers for some time. Caleb arrived early, 15 minutes before the agreed time. The morning crowd was thin, a few regulars at the counter, 2 police officers finishing their night shift meals, a waitress who had clearly been there since dawn. Caleb chose a booth near the back, positioned so he could see the door. He ordered black coffee and waited, watching steam rise from the cup in steady curls. The coffee was good, strong, and honest, like the place itself. Gordon Holloway arrived some time later, slightly late, but not enough to matter. He moved through the diner with the hesitant steps of someone who would rather be anywhere else. Caleb recognized the guilt in his posture before Gordon even reached the table. It was there in the careful way he sat down, in how he would not quite meet Caleb's eyes. "Thanks for meeting me," Caleb said. "Of course," Gordon replied, his tone overcorrected to sound casual. "I was surprised to hear from you." The waitress came by. Gordon ordered coffee with cream and sugar. His hands fidgeted with the paper napkin dispenser while they waited. Caleb had known Gordon for some years, had gone fishing with him, helped him move furniture, sat next to him at countless family dinners. Gordon was a decent man in the specific way that made his current discomfort more revealing. He knew something. He had been carrying it. When the waitress brought Gordon's coffee, Caleb watched him stir it without drinking. 3 slow circles with the spoon, a 4th, still not looking up. "I need to ask you something," Caleb said quietly, "about Elena." Gordon's spoon clinked against the cup. "Caleb, I don't want to get in the middle. When did she tell the family she was leaving?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Gordon's stirring stopped. His shoulders tensed slightly. I try to stay out of—" "Gordon," Caleb's voice remained soft. "I'm not here to put you in anything. I just need to know when." The diner's ambient noise seemed to fade. Just 2 men at a booth, steam rising from coffee cups, and the weight of a truth about to be spoken. Gordon stared into his coffee for what felt like a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Some time ago." He swallowed. "She told Mom first, then the rest of us at dinner that Sunday. She said she'd already decided." Caleb absorbed this with perfect stillness. Some time, before Uncle Marcus's warning call about Louisville, before the forged transfer attempt, before Caleb had any reason to doubt their marriage was intact. Some time of ordinary mornings, of discussing paint colors for the guest room, of planning the garden for spring, of Caleb kissing her goodbye before work, of cooking dinner together, of talking about their days. Some time of her family knowing it was already over while Caleb built their future alone. "She made us promise not to say anything," Gordon added, as if this somehow helped. "She said she needed time to—" "It's okay," Caleb interrupted softly. He reached for his wallet and placed enough cash on the table to cover both coffees plus a generous tip. "Thank you for telling me now." He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out of the diner without looking back. Gordon remained at the booth, staring into his untouched coffee as if it might offer absolution. Caleb got into the Cullinan and sat perfectly still behind the wheel. The morning sun slanted through the windshield, warming the leather interior. Traffic moved steadily past on Madison. The world continued its ordinary rhythm while Caleb processed what some time really meant. Not the money, not the forgery, not even the affair itself, but some time of performing a marriage that existed only for him, some time of being alone without knowing it. He sat unmoving for several minutes, one hand resting lightly on the steering wheel. Then he started the engine, pulled smoothly into traffic, and called Victoria. "File everything," he said simply. "Tomorrow morning." The hotel suite felt different that evening, more purposeful, like an operating room before surgery. Caleb sat at the dining table with Victoria Okafor and Margaret Pruitt, his divorce attorney, surrounded by precisely organized stacks of documents. The city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, creating a backdrop that felt appropriately dramatic for what they were about to set in motion. "Let's confirm the sequence one more time," Margaret said, spreading out a timeline she had drafted. Her voice carried the steady confidence of someone who had orchestrated complex legal maneuvers many times before. Caleb nodded, his expression calm. "Walk me through it." Victoria opened her leather portfolio. At the appointed time tomorrow, I file the divorce response with the full financial disclosure. Every asset, every account, every property. $4.2 million in total, all of it properly structured as separate property throughout the marriage. The moment that hits, Margaret added, Elena's attorney will have to completely reassess their strategy. They filed expecting a modest marital estate under $700,000. This changes everything for them. Simultaneously, Victoria continued, the forgery documentation goes to the prosecutor's office. We've got the forensic handwriting analysis confirming the Avondale transfer document was falsified, plus the paper trail showing Elena attempted to record the fraudulent transfer. Caleb examined the forensics report one last time. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Pay attention to the details, son. That's where the truth lives. I'll make the calls to Thomas Reed and Michael Chen myself, Caleb said, referring to the commercial clients whose contracts were won using his name. They deserve to hear it directly from me. Margaret slid 2 prepared statements across the table. These outline exactly what to say. Stick to the facts, no emotional language, just that Derek Lang used your name and professional reputation without consent to secure those contracts. Thomas will pull immediately, Caleb said with quiet certainty. He values reputation above everything else. Victoria moved to the next item. Once those calls are made, I file the civil claim regarding the LLC financial irregularities. That will trigger an automatic freeze on the joint account Derek and Elena established some time ago. The documentation shows clear patterns of inflated vendor invoices being used to extract cash. Caleb stood and walked to the window, processing each step. The city sprawled below. Thousands of lights marking thousands of lives continuing their ordinary course. Tomorrow, 2 of those lives would be fundamentally disrupted. What about the Avondale tenants? He asked, turning back to face the attorneys. Margaret checked her notes. We've drafted a letter informing them that the ownership dispute is being resolved and they'll receive formal documentation within some time. Their leases remain valid and protected throughout this process. Good, Caleb said. They shouldn't suffer for other people's choices. They spent the next period reviewing every document, every filing, every planned action. Caleb asked precise questions, seeking clarity on specific legal language and timing. There was no excitement in his manner, no anticipation of revenge. He approached it like any other project, with thoroughness and attention to detail. As the meeting concluded, Victoria gathered her files. Everything is ready, Caleb. At the appointed time tomorrow, it all begins. Margaret stood as well. Try to get some rest tonight. Tomorrow will be intense, even if everything goes exactly as planned. Caleb walked them to the door, thanking them both with quiet sincerity. When they were gone, he returned to the window. The city had grown quieter, but it never truly slept. Neither would he, probably. He thought about the oak tree in front of his former home, about standing in the rain that night, about the look on Elena's face through the 4-inch gap of the chained door. He thought about his father's words again. Never let a person know the full size of what you've built or who you are. Standing there in the quiet suite, Caleb finally understood. His father had not been teaching him to be secretive. He had been teaching him to be discerning, to watch, to wait, to know for certain before revealing yourself fully. Caleb turned off the light and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would arrive with its own momentum and everything would change for Elena and Derek. But tonight was for silence, for stillness, for the last quiet moments before consequence. Caleb arrived at the office at his usual time that morning, his work truck pulling into its usual spot in the employee parking lot. He carried his regular coffee tumbler, nodded to the security guard, and walked to his office with the same measured pace he showed every morning. Nothing in his demeanor suggested this day would be different from any other. He reviewed project timelines, responded to emails, and conducted his regular team check-in with characteristic focus. The only sign that this was not an ordinary morning was the personal phone sitting silently in his jacket pocket, waiting. At the appointed time, it vibrated once. A text from Victoria Okafor. Filed. Caleb read it, sent back a simple "confirmed," and returned to his review of a contractor's revised budget proposal. His hands remained steady on the keyboard. His breathing stayed even. He had learned long ago that the most important moments required the least dramatic response. Across town, in her modernly furnished home office, Elena was sorting through design samples when her phone rang. Her attorney's name appeared on the screen. She answered with the casual confidence of someone who believed everything was proceeding according to plan. "We need to meet immediately," her attorney said. The voice carried an unfamiliar note. Professional composure barely containing genuine alarm. "Something has been filed that changes our entire approach." Elena arrived at the law office some time later, her heels clicking purposefully across the marble lobby floor. The receptionist directed her straight back. No waiting, no preliminary small talk. Her attorney was standing when she entered, which was the first sign that something was truly wrong. "Before we discuss anything else," the attorney said, lifting a substantial document from her desk, "you need to read this. It's your husband's financial disclosure response." Elena took the papers with manicured hands that still showed no tremor. She began reading. Then she stopped, started again from the beginning. The numbers refused to make sense, so she read them a third time. $4.2 million in total assets, 11 properties across 3 cities held in separate LLCs, a 60% silent partnership stake in a commercial development firm, a trust established before the marriage, never disclosed, worth over $900,000. All of it structured as separate property. All of it legally protected. All of it completely unknown to her until this moment. "This isn't possible," Elena said, her voice finally showing strain. "He's a project manager. We have joint accounts. I've seen his paychecks." Her attorney's voice was carefully measured. "What you saw was what he allowed to be visible. The marital estate, the portion you have any legitimate claim to, amounts to approximately $180,000. The house equity and the joint accounts. Nothing else." Elena stood abruptly, gathering her bag. "I need to make a call." In the parking garage, she pressed Derek's number with shaking fingers. When he answered, she described the disclosure in fragmentary sentences, her usual poise cracking. The silence on Derek's end stretched longer with each revelation. She could hear him processing, recalculating, adjusting his understanding of what their future actually contained. Before Derek could respond, her phone buzzed with another incoming call. Her attorney again. "The prosecutor's office has been in contact," the attorney said without preamble. "They're reviewing documentation regarding the Avondale property transfer. Elena, we need to discuss potential criminal exposure." She ended that call only to have another immediately begin. Gordon, her brother, his voice tight with something between guilt and warning. "Mom knows," he said. "Someone called her. She's devastated, Elena. She keeps asking how long you knew you were leaving before you told Caleb." Elena leaned against a concrete pillar in the garage, her designer dress catching on the rough surface. She put Derek back on the line, her voice now openly pleading for reassurance. Instead, Derek said, "I can't have my name connected to a criminal investigation, not with the contracts we have pending." In that moment, standing alone in the cold fluorescent light of an underground parking garage, Elena understood the true nature of what she had built with Derek. Not a partnership founded on love or loyalty, but a transaction based on expected assets that no longer existed. She held her silent phone, surrounded by empty parking spaces, facing a settlement that had evaporated and a criminal referral that was already in motion. She had nothing left to negotiate with, and no one standing beside her. The restaurant stood in Cincinnati's historic district, its limestone facade catching the afternoon light. Caleb arrived some time early, parking the Cullinan himself. He nodded to the valet, who recognized him not as a guest, but as one of the owners. Inside, the host's face brightened with genuine warmth. "Mr. Brooks, always good to see you. Your private room is ready." Caleb thanked him quietly. He had owned some percentage of this restaurant for some time. The staff knew him as the silent partner who fixed problems before they became crises and never demanded recognition. He waited in the lobby, hands loose at his sides, watching the street through the front windows. Elena arrived precisely on time in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She entered with practiced poise, her chin lifted slightly, the way she carried herself in client meetings when she needed to project authority. She saw Caleb first, then noticed how the host immediately approached him rather than her. "Mr. Brooks, shall I show you and your guest to your room?" The word "your" landed with precise weight. Elena's step faltered almost imperceptibly. She had prepared for this meeting believing she still held some advantage of familiarity, some ability to manage Caleb's reactions the way she always had. But this small moment, the host's deference, the private room, the clear indication that Caleb owned some part of this space, disrupted her script before it began. They followed the host through the main dining room, past tables of people who nodded to Caleb with varying degrees of recognition. The private room was in the back, warm wood panels and soft lighting, a single table set for two. Caleb held Elena's chair without ceremony. They sat. Elena spoke first, her voice carrying the careful modulation of someone who had rehearsed their lines. "I know this isn't how either of us wanted things to end. I hope we can handle this like adults. I never meant for it to become—" She trailed off, perhaps realizing that every word sounded hollow in this room that partially belonged to the man she had tried to leave with nothing. Caleb let the silence hold for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket and withdrew a single photograph. He placed it on the table between them, Elena and Derek at a Louisville restaurant some time ago. They were sitting close, his hand on her wrist, both of them laughing at something just said. "I'm not here about the affair," Caleb said quietly. "I've made my peace with what that means about you." He opened a thin folder and began laying out documents one by one. His voice remained steady, almost gentle, as he walked her through each item. The forged property transfer bearing his supposed signature, the LLC, financial records showing systematically inflated vendor invoices, bank statements from the joint account she and Derek had opened while she was still living in Caleb's house. He spoke from memory, never once referring to the papers. He had lived with this information long enough to know every detail by heart. "You looked at me for some years," he said, "and saw exactly what you expected to see. A salary, a work truck, a modest joint account. You decided that was the whole picture." He paused, meeting her eyes directly. "You never asked who I actually was." Elena's hands were perfectly still in her lap, but her breathing had become shallow. The careful script she had prepared was useless against this version of Caleb, this man who spoke with quiet certainty about things she had believed were perfectly hidden. "These clients," Caleb continued, indicating another document, "who were told I would be connected to their projects. They trusted you because they trusted me. That trust wasn't yours to spend." A waiter appeared briefly with water, nodding to Caleb with familiar respect before withdrawing. The moment underscored everything. This was Caleb's space, Caleb's timing, Caleb's truth finally spoken aloud. Caleb stood, straightening his jacket with the same unhurried movement he had always shown. "I want you to understand that I'm not angry," he said. "I'm clear. Those are different things." He turned and walked out of the private room without looking back. The door closed silently behind him. Elena sat alone at the table, surrounded by documents that mapped the precise shape of her miscalculation. Through the walls, she could hear the muted sounds of the restaurant, Caleb's restaurant at least in part, continuing its normal service. She did not move for a long time. There was nothing left to negotiate, nothing left to manage, nothing left to perform. The consequences arrived like a tide, steady, inevitable, and permanent. No single wave, but the constant press of water against foundations until what was poorly built simply washed away. The civil settlement landed first. Under the weight of the forgery documentation, Elena's attorney advised her to accept terms that included repaying all rental income extracted during the fraudulent Avondale transfer attempt. The number was not catastrophic, but it drained the modest settlement she did receive, her legitimate equitable share of approximately $180,000 from the joint assets. The prosecutor's office declined to pursue criminal charges, but placed a notation in her record. It followed her, quiet but persistent, appearing in background checks and professional license reviews, like a shadow that never quite lifted. Her design firm felt the shift within some time. Contracts that had seemed secure began to waver. Clients who had come through Caleb's network found polite reasons to delay renewals. The business did not collapse dramatically. It contracted steadily and quietly until the office that had once hummed with activity fell silent more often than not. Sometime after the divorce was finalized, Elena closed the firm's doors. She packed her design portfolios and relocated to Columbus, where no one knew the full story, but everyone seemed to know enough. The community she had built in Cincinnati, the carefully cultivated relationships, the social circles, the professional alliances, did not follow her. They had been built on Caleb's foundation, and that foundation no longer existed. Derek's unraveling was equally methodical. The 2 major contracts he lost the morning everything broke were just the beginning. One of his remaining clients, reading about the LLC financial irregularities in Victoria's civil claim, invoked their forensic accounting clause. The audit revealed patterns that raised questions no one could satisfactorily answer. Word traveled in the specific way it does in professional circles, not as gossip, but as quiet warnings passed between decision-makers. Derek's reputation, built over some years of strategic relationship cultivation, began to dissolve. He was not criminally charged, but at his level being unhireable was its own sentence. The pressure cracked what he and Elena had built together. Without the promised settlement money, without their shared business vision, without the carefully constructed future they had planned, they had nothing left to stand on. They separated some time after everything fell apart. Caleb learned about their separation from Rachel, who heard it through industry channels. He was reviewing project timelines when she told him. He said only, "Okay." Then he returned to his work, the same steady focus he had always shown. Some time passed like water. Caleb's portfolio grew to 13 properties. The original 11, plus a 14-unit building in Norwood and a small commercial strip in Dayton he was converting to mixed use. His silent partnership in the development LLC closed its largest project to date. The firm promoted him to Director of Project Operations. He accepted because he enjoyed the work, not because he needed the salary. His colleagues noted that he seemed more present somehow, as if a weight had lifted that they had not known he was carrying. He bought a house, not the one with the oak tree, but a solid craftsman with a deep porch that faced west. The evenings there were long and golden. He planted a Japanese maple in the yard, the kind that turned deep red in fall. He did not rush its growth. He simply gave it good soil and watched it take root. Claire came into his life gradually, the way the best things often do. A nurse with direct eyes and patient hands, she laughed at his attempts at jokes even when they did not quite land. She had a key to his house, but never presumed about what that meant. Caleb had not shown her the full picture yet, but he was beginning to think she was someone worth showing. In his home office drawer, he kept one document, the first filing Victoria had prepared for him, dated the morning after Uncle Marcus's warning call. Sometimes he looked at it, not with regret, but with a kind of quiet recognition. This was the moment he chose preparation over hope, action over wishful thinking. On a rain-misted Saturday morning, Caleb stood outside the Norwood property reviewing a contractor's punch list. The rain fell lightly, more suggestion than substance. He looked up from the papers and thought briefly about another driveway, changed locks, an oak tree. He remembered the specific feeling of standing in the wet dark trying to find words that would not come. Some time. That is all it had taken then. He walked to the Cullinan parked at the curb and got behind the wheel himself. Something he rarely did. The navigation system waited for input. He typed in Uncle Marcus's address in Louisville, deciding to surprise the old man, maybe take him somewhere unreasonably good for lunch. The rain picked up slightly as he pulled away from the curb. The wipers moved across the windshield in their quiet, steady rhythm, clearing the view ahead of everything that had once obscured it. Caleb drove. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you do not miss the next story. I have picked out two more for you that I think you will really like.